how I describe it. It's too strong on the sage. Earthy, perhaps, but it's just I put way too much, and like everybody always says, the dried is so much more powerful than the fresh, but I always find the opposite. Like anytime I've used fresh mints or fresh sage versus dried, I've always found that the fresh is way more potent.
What's tough.
But it's hard to figure out amounts though when you're talking about fresh versus dried though.
Yeah, just so in a herbalist perspective, I mean, generally we'll use, weight-wise, physical weight, about twice as much of the fresh as we would of the dried. So if you're using a gram of the dried, you use 2 grams of fresh. Again, that's kind of a general principle, so a starting point.
I would guess it also depends.
Follow that.
Yeah, it would. I guess it would also depend on how fresh your dried is. No.
And how well it's been
we've seen that with the lemon balm, especially. That lemon note is gone so quickly, and so fresh dried versus wholesaler's dried is insanely different.
Okay.
Just night and day different. And orange as well. I mean, orange peel. Get the orange, zest it right there. Seriously, because that limonene and all the other notes in there dissipate so quickly that unless you want a muted, kind of round, almost, for lack of a better term, kind of almost stale or oxidized type flavor, which you can look for, you want it to be fresh. So, really honestly, one of the other ones that surprised me here that we've loved to death was a short infusion of lavender, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, with fresh citrus peel.
Ooh.
That's been one that was really beautiful. We did that one, 4 grams of residual sugar in the bottle. I mean, just crazy dry. But it was really nice. Really, really nice. So that's a good one. Obviously, lime and basil or lemon and basil fit perfectly. I've had some great examples, built out of almost, like a spicy pepper, like say habanero, lime, basil, or things like that would be kind of those crossovers, and that's probably where I would start. Beyond that, chamomile is probably my favorite because it brings out the best in any honey you put it with. I don't care what honey it is that I've used, it's always tasted better with chamomile. Always. I mean, it's just incredible, and so that's another really nice one to use. That, again, I mean, even if you're just buying sleepy time tea, it's not going to be the best, but you're going to get those earthy notes, that hint of bitterness, the tannins, the little hint of cinnamon, and all these other really cool flavors to accentuate your honey and help balance the sweetness of the honey a little bit. So that's another really good one that people should be able to find.
You talk about the staying power of herbs and having them dissipate over time and whatnot. I've made some star anise mead before, which was really, really good for about 3 days, and then you couldn't taste it anymore. Now, one of the other things I have here is a crazy, out-of-control weed that grows all throughout my area called fennel that I've never been brave enough to make into a mead. Have you ever played with that, and how would you go about it?
Pepper and licorice, man. I love fennel. It's a great cooking herb.
Yeah, I just expect it to kind of come to something like ouzo, honestly, because it is pretty potent. I haven't. We'll say the only way I've played with it is, back in my college days, distilling absinthe, and that's been about all I've done with it. I haven't used it at the meadery yet.
That's illegal.
Yeah, no, of course, I shouldn't have probably said that, but, there's no evidence
in a laboratory
anymore.
setting. It was in a laboratory setting.
Yeah, it was for sample purposes only in my education, and we tested the thujone levels, and, but no, I haven't played with it much, and I haven't played with it with mead, but yeah, so I wouldn't have a lot to offer there, but I would expect that it would be something that I would look at, like fig, for instance, It's one of the pairings that I've seen that really surprised me out of some of the chocolatiers is fig and fennel, and it was incredibly nice. I mean, it picked up the vegetal characteristics almost underneath of the fig sweetness, and helped to preserve the sweetness going forward. So that's something that you might try, and have go well potentially.
So would you just chop the bulb and let it sit on it, or would you put the fronds a whole lot in, or what? Because I got bucket loads of it.
I might use the seed. Yeah, I might use a seed personally.
The seed,
because that's what I've seen. I know that's what they're using in ouzo. I know that's what they're using in other things. Actually, the seed once it sets. Obviously, you'll probably have plenty of those as well.
Yeah, not so much seed as you have actual plant. Like these things are taller than I am.
The foliage would probably be a good usage in that kind of case. The bulb is really mild, though, so that's something that could be useful. And I know that when we've cooked with it and we've actually eaten it, it does tend, I find that it really gives a lot of sweetness once it's been roasted for a little bit, but it's not necessarily the like the anethol sweetness. It's more of the physical breakdown of the bulb itself. So that it could produce like fructose potentially. I'm not positive what the longer chain sugars in fennel are, but it could produce some fructose potentially that would be interesting. It'd give almost those cidery type flavors with that hint of sweetness, maybe.
I'll take it, maybe.
We're gonna have to do an Ask the Herbalist.
Oh yeah. Just email me some questions.
Well, no, I'm just thinking about having you on, where we just do kind of an open call-in show where people who are making metheglins and who want to try something different can sort of check in with you, and who knows what sort of ideas you'll get from it too. We actually have got Matt Weed at Blue Hand Mead said that he's really digging the discussion on using herbs and meads that came in on the Twitter feed.
Well, good. Yeah.
So this is awesome sauce, man.
Well, it's like I emailed you. It's like that's really just honestly my entire hope for being on the show is just that people interact with the plants more. I mean, they interact with the herbs more. That we get a more vibrant tradition going. Because it's, obviously I think that there's a lot of stuff like, okay, I just don't know what I'm doing, and I still feel that way, even despite the fact that I have a lot of training. I still feel that way. Yeah. I'm still coming at it with this mind state of, you make something and then you just analyze it, and you say, okay, what can I do better? Where are the holes in this mead? Where are the holes in this flavor? And then what can we do about that? And that's the same process I assume is going on in every other meadery on Earth right now. It just doesn't necessarily involve the herbs, and I hope it does.
Well, and I think metheglins, for a lot of people, not everybody, but for a lot of people, metheglins are kind of a scary place to go, because while everybody knows that Christmas spices are good incisors, it's kind of the pumpkin spice of meads, but it's getting out there and using something outside the kind of quote unquote beaten path is something that a lot of people are afraid to do because they don't know how it will go together and whether or not that'll work in in a honey-based environment too, because cooking with it and eating it is a whole different experience than necessarily putting it in a mead. So I think this is fascinating because it's raising all sorts of combinations and ideas I never thought of, and I love herbs. I mean, I'm a herb nut cooking, and like I say, I've been dabbling in it as as just an amateur messing about with herbs for medicinal purposes for years. So I'm
sure you have some fantastic recipes. I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you've ever listened to the show before, but yeah, my big mead and herb experiment was my very first mead. It literally had 26 different herbs in it. And it was a recipe from a book called The Witch's Brew that was published by Patricia Telesco, and it was published by Llewellyn Press. It's actually still available on Amazon for anybody who wants to get it. But it had this mead recipe and had everything from bay leaves to lemon peel and everything in between. And I made it because I love herbs. I love to cook with herbs. I've literally got 2 shelves full of herbs in my pantry that I cook with every day. And I'm one of those, this sounds like it'd be interesting. Let's pour some of this in here, and see what that does. So that's how I learn about them. But anyway, I made this mead, and my very first mead, so I know diddly squat about fermentation. Nobody did at that point. I knew diddly squat about, how to feed a yeast. Again, nobody did at that point. There was no information out there on it. And I personally had no idea how to make mead other than fling this stuff all in a bucket, put the top on, put a little bubbler on it, and wait. So I take the herbs and I stuff them all into a bag and I just fling it into the mead. and then wait, And we all know how quickly this is a 5-gallon batch or 3-gallon batch. We all know how quickly that can get out of control. So when I pulled it out, I mean, there's just cracked pepper and bay leaves and orange peel and lemon peel and coriander and cinnamon and nutmeg and I mean all kind of stuff. And when I pulled it out, this stuff was terrible. I mean, it was awful. and because first mead, so it's like throwing your baby out, right? I was just like, no, I can't. So I covered the top of it was a 3-gallon glass carboy. I covered the top with a whole bunch of saran wrap, rubber banded the crap out of it, and stuck it in the basement. Tried to pretend that I'd never done it. But I couldn't bring myself to dump it. My husband's going, could you please dump that? And I'm going, no, I can't. It's my first one. And so periodically, as I was going downstairs to do the laundry, I'd go, I should check that out. And I'd go over there and I'd get my little turkey baster and I'd pull a little bit out, put it in a cup and go, oh my God, that's like gasoline. And I'd dump it out. About 2.5, 2 3/4, 3 years later in that vicinity, somewhere along the line, it went from being horrible, hot, icky, overspiced gasoline to being, and I kid you not, nectar of the gods. It was like manna. Could not believe it. And of course, at that point, there was like maybe a bottle and a half left, So it was like, dang, And I didn't take notes, so I have no idea what I did. I've got to go back. I know what the recipe is because I still have the book I made it from, but now I'm going to go back and do it with proper fermentation techniques, using an appropriate yeast, and so forth and so on. And
it's going to suck.
You can just get people into orbit with it.
Yeah. And I'm just curious to see how it's going to turn out when done in proper fashion from a fermentation standpoint. But yeah.
It sounds like it's good even with the standard issues of people first starting with meads before they knew about any of the ways of making mead.
Well, this was
in the current best practice, right?
Right. Yeah. This was when Got Mead. Okay, Got Mead was a 1-page HTML page with a half a dozen links on it on MindSpring, which hasn't existed in 18 years. This was over 20 years ago. And so this was the very first. There was no search engines. There was no Google. There was none of that. I'm finding this stuff on a CompuServe at my father-in-law's.
Usenet.
Oh, Usenet. Yeah, totally. And, so I was in the dark, totally in the dark. But, I mean, it was a really interesting. I sent a bottle of it to the original Mazer Cup, run by Ken Schramm and his friends up in Michigan. So this was back in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. Sent a bottle of it knowing I was totally going to get panned and I wasn't going to win anything. But I got some really amazing tasting notes back that really helped me on my journey making mead. So...
That's the entire reason we competed. I mean, it's for that. Just for the notes of people tasting it. And you're like, okay, I want to know what you think.
Yeah. Well, that's
I don't care if you give me a medal. I want to know what you think.
Yeah, I'm not interested in... Well, okay, I would not turn down a medal if I was to win one, but I'm not interested in medals when I do enter, which isn't often anymore. But when I do enter, I want to know what people think of it and how can I fix it? How can I improve it? How can I make it better?
Mm-hmm.
Is this as good as I think it is? Yeah.
Right, yeah. And all my friends keep telling me because they just want to get drunk. They're just, Can't trust your
my wife
friends.
actually, sorry, during the whole sequence of this whole story, my wife came screaming down here and just scribbled furiously on a piece of paper here, something that I really should have remembered, honestly. So we were saying one of the things we made medicated wines in class, so you can tell we had some pretty awesome classes, and the only way to do that, to make space for that, is of course to pour a glass of wine out of the bottle. And then you drink it while you're thinking about what you're going to put back into it, right? And so that's a really traditional method, is actually just to... Okay, you're like, I need to make 4 more of these.
Yeah.
But that's kind of one of the things we did is we actually just took like a formula. We said, okay, what do I like, right? What do I think is going to work in here? And we